Hey guys, Dad6 here, back with another Dragon Age Veilguard video. The ultimate choice you have to make before you start the game is your class and your background. Later on, you'll need to choose which companions to bring with you and how to specialize your chosen class. So which combination do you choose? For example, you might want to choose the Mage Deathcaller and the Mourn Watch background to perfectly roleplay, and have a warrior in Davrin for a tank and a rogue in Harding for a ranged damage dealer. Keeping in mind you can only bring 2 companions with you on each mission, and building trust with them gives them skill points, so you'll want to make a choice early on who to bring with you, just like you need to make a class and background choice. So in this video, I'll go through the classes and their specializations, specifically what they do, then I'll go through the background choices and what the faction is about, and then finally run through each companion and how I would personally marry together classes, backgrounds, and companion choices in each playthrough, hopefully making it much easier for you to make your own choices of what to pick come release. So let's get right into it. The first major choice you'll need to make is picking your class. You have 3 class choices at the start of the game: the warrior, the rogue, and the mage. Each has 3 specializations. The warrior has the champion, reaper, and slayer. The rogue has the duelist, the saboteur, and the veil ranger, and the mage has the deathcaller, invoker, and spellblade. Sadly, we don't have a lot of information on the specifics of the class specializations yet, so we'll have to make assumptions based on past Dragon Age titles, the hints and information we've been given, and the skill trees. So I'll run through each specialization, then later each background and companion, and what I feel is the best combination. So first is the champion. It's a specialization focused on using one-handed weapons and a shield. Protecting and buffing allies and intimidating enemies is the name of the game with the champion. We know this based on how they played in Origins. The Reaper is a 2-handed warrior, leaning towards tankiness and risk-reward, though I wouldn't be surprised if it wants to use a sword and board as well. It seems based on conversations with the devs that this is a siphon life kind of specialization, which means it's similar to the Reaver class in other Dragon Age titles. It leans towards survival and abilities on the skill tree, so it seems most likely to be true. It could be your more magical focused warrior, which is why it has the name change. Even the graphic on the skill tree makes it seem more like a shadow-based magical class. The Slayer will be your pure damage warrior. You see that on the skill tree, it's between weapons and ability nodes. This means a 2-handed weapon and a lot of powerful AoE attacks. Think ripping up the ground with slams and earthquakes. Then moving over to the rogue specializations, the Duelist will be your typical melee rogue. They dual wield and will be a menace on the battlefield, dashing around and dealing high damage. They're between the sustain and burst nodes, meaning they'll have easy access to ways to increase their survivability, probably through dashing, and ways to dish out damage. The Saboteur will be your tricksy rogue, most likely stealthing around and laying traps. They're between sustain and control, which lends credence to my suspicion. They may also have poisons, caltrops, and throwing knives based on the sabotage abilities in Dragon Age Inquisition. I have a feeling that control pips will have some ranged components to them, so perhaps Saboteur could be both melee and ranged. It seems to be the specialization for those who want tricks and tools for any situation. The Veil Ranger seems to be the rogue's ranged specialization. This is confirmed by the graphic in the skill tree, though the word Veil suggests there will be some magical components to the specialization. We've already seen in the gameplay that the rogue gets the magical ability Static Strikes, which fires 2 magical electric bolts at enemies, so the line is being blurred between what classes can cast magic or not. This could be explained lore-wise by runes in the class weapons, or how, like Ballera, is a mage that uses a bow. You could be a rogue but also a mage as a Veil Ranger. Regardless of what skills the Veil Ranger gets, it will be focused on range. Now let's go over the mage specializations. The Deathcaller, simply put, has to be the Necromancer specialization. Think of controlling your enemies with horror spells, siphoning health, spirit damage, one of my favorite skills, Walking Bomb, and best of all, summoning minions. They're between the control and sustain part of the skill tree. Control will come from horrify effects as well as potential buffs and debuffs, whereas sustain comes from the Necromancer's ability to siphon health. So the Deathcaller will be more of a supporty, tanky mage than the others. But if you really want the ultimate support, make sure you pick yourself up a proper PC. This is a custom Mass Effect inspired MSI Project Zero PC thanks to Aftershock.
just check out the detail.
When MSI reached out and asked if I wanted to make a custom Dantix PC, I had no idea it would turn out this beautiful.
My god, it's incredible.
The star of the show is the MSI Project Zero, which is a rear-facing motherboard that streamlines the build process, allowing you to get minimalist builds like this one tidier and easier than ever before. If you hate cables but want to maximize your customization, man, this is the way to go. This PC also utilizes a powerful MSI GeForce RTX 4080 Super, and with liquid cooling and the latest DLSS tech, I'm pushing the frames into the hundreds even for the most intensive titles with ray tracing on. I just got finished gaming and editing a video and it's still whisper quiet. Aftershock blew this out of the park because they let me build the PC I wanted to build. So thanks to MSI and Aftershock, this is truly a love letter to me and my all-time favorite series. Let's continue with the Invoker, which will be your pure range damage specialization, focusing on elemental damage. It doesn't seem like you can specialize in a damage type based on the skill tree, but is placed between control and burst. I figure ice will help with the control part and burst will be your pure damage spells like Meteor. If you want to play as the purest form of mage, this is it. Finally, we have the Spellblade. This is your melee specialization. It was mentioned you can put an arcane bomb-like effect on an enemy, then detonate it with a heavy melee attack. While charging the heavy attack though, the player switched to magical daggers. So you'll be a mage that can easily get up in the face of enemies and unleash combo-based spells. The specialization is between burst and sustain, which makes sense based on its melee nature. So if you want a flashy, get up in your face mage, this is it. Really, all the specializations fit elegantly between the nodes. Now that you have a good idea of what classes and specializations you have access to, what about your background faction choice and how do they fit together? First, choosing a background faction will affect faction allegiance, in-game dialogue, and reputation standing. It's unclear the exact extent of how these matter, but since it's a BioWare game, you can be sure it'll be brought up multiple times. We do know the choice will give you tangible benefits. Each faction offers 3 distinct buffs each, like being able to hold an extra potion or do extra damage against certain enemies. At this point in time, we don't know exactly what they are, but expect it to heavily influence your decision. The Grey Wardens are an ancient order sworn to fight Darkspawn and monsters. Wardens undergo secret rites that grant them supernatural powers. We know that it's drinking the blood of Darkspawn, so those who survive this rite become Grey Wardens. If you choose this background, I hope you actually are a fully fledged Grey Warden that's undertaken the rite. In gameplay, it seems you'll get bonuses to Darkspawn. Davrin is part of this faction. The Veil Jumpers are explorers of ancient elven ruins. They welcome anyone brave enough to face the Arlathan Forest reality warping magic. Not much is covered with this faction outside of comics, but they'll be your historians and academics, people who want to learn more about the world rather than fighting for the sake of fighting. Ballera is part of this faction. Shadow Dragons are a resistance opposing corrupt rulers and slavery in Tevinter. They're determined to bring justice to the people. As we've been reminded all throughout the Dragon Age series, Tevinter is home to oppressive mage rulers who are not adverse to slavery. So being a part of the Shadow Dragons means you are part of a resistance against that. Neve is part of this faction. Lords of Fortune are your explorers, hunters, and treasure seekers from Rivian who are famed for their daring exploits and narrow escapes, so your pirate faction. It's very cut and dry what kind of person you want to be when picking this background. Taash is a member of this faction. The Mourn Watch is an elite necromantic order that tends to Navarra's sprawling grand necropolis, where the undead walk and spirits dwell. Not much is mentioned about this faction prior to Veilguard, so it'll be interesting to see what they're about. But if you want that edginess or focus on the undead, this might be the faction for you. Emmrich is obviously a member of this faction. Finally, we have the Antivan Crows, which is heavily mentioned throughout the series, starting with Dragon Age Origins. Swift knives in the dark, these ruthless assassins are respected and feared as Antiva's shadowy protectors. Though I'm not sure you'd call them that, as they're known for taking orphans, trading them, and unleashing them on the world as contract assassins, whose lives would be forfeit if they can't complete kills that are assigned to them. This much is obvious when you meet Zevran in Origins, so I hope they don't try to brighten up the pre-existing lore. Lucanis is a member of this faction. So to summarize, we have the honorable protectors of the innocent, the Grey Wardens, we have the academically inclined Veil Jumpers, we have the resistance fighters in the Shadow Dragons, we have the fortune-seeking pirates and hunters in the Lords of Fortune, we have the edgy undead-loving Mourn Watch, and we have the contract assassins, the Antivan Crows. So this is how I would personally align factions to classes, though really you could roleplay any class specialization with any faction background. When it comes to Grey Wardens, I think the Warrior Champion specialization works best. This is both a class and a faction that wants to stand between the dangers of the world and the innocent. Though Davrin seems to fit this role as well, so Invoker could also work if you want the bonus Davrin dialogue without the class crossover, since the Invoker is a no-nonsense damage dealing mage, since only the powerful and talented are recruited into the Grey Wardens. When it comes to the Veil Jumpers, I think a Spellblade or Veil Ranger would work best. There's something about having a bit of magic that speaks to the Veil Jumpers to me, and no doubt the Veil Ranger will have some magic and, well, powers revolving around the Veil. The Spellblade simply is the mage class with the most arcane feel to it. When it comes to the Shadow Dragons, you're a faction revolved around bringing down oppressive Tevinter mages, which include the Venatori. In this case, you may yourself be a mage, so the Invoker specialization would suit. You also may be something specialized in killing mages, where a sneaky Saboteur would also work as well. You're a rebel after all. The Lords of Fortune are a faction of self-made fortune seekers, so naturally a Duelist and a Slayer would be perfect for this role. They both focus on high damage output and fit that pirate or monster hunter role. When it comes to the Mourn Watch, it's a no-brainer that the Deathcaller, aka the Necromancer specialization, would fit the mold here. Though if you want Emmrich on your squad to see the background bonus dialogue without double dipping into the Necromancer class, you'll want to pick the Reaper. They focus around siphoning life, and the name is Reaper, so it definitely suits the theme. Finally, the Antivan Crows. This is an assassin-based faction, so any rogue specialization would suit. However, so would the Reaper and Deathcaller because they focus around death and the Crows aren't exactly adverse to it. So I feel as though there's a class specialization that suits every faction. You may have noticed that yes, class specialization seems to have icons that match the background's icons. You don't need to be said background to specialize, and I think this may have been leftover iconography from a time where backgrounds and specializations were linked. However, these do also seem to align well. The Grey Wardens matching the Champions, the Veil Jumpers matching the Veil Ranger, the Shadow Dragons matching the Invoker, the Lords of Fortune matching the Slayer and the Saboteur, the Mourn Watch matching the Deathcaller and Reaper, and the Antivan Crows matching the Duelist and the Spellblade. So you could follow this when matching classes and backgrounds. Though, how do classes and backgrounds fit with your companions? First, to get skill points for your companions, you need to level up their relationship with you. So it might be wise, at least at the start, to stick to 2 or 3 companions only. You can only take 2 with you on missions and can't swap them out mid-mission, therefore it makes sense to focus on building trust with a few rather than all. So let's run through all the companions. Neve is a mage, more specifically an ice mage. She's a detective with a prosthetic leg. As you'd expect, ice is good at controlling the battlefield and enemies, so if you want damage and control, Neve might be the way to go. She's part of the Shadow Dragons faction. Lucanis is labelled as a mage killer, so will no doubt be a rogue capable of outputting some high single target damage. He's shown with twin daggers, but like all rogues in this game, I'm sure he can use a bow as well, though since Harding and even Ballera will fill the role of ranged rogue, I feel the bow will either be something you can invest into or he simply won't focus on it at all. He very well may have a lot of anti-magic abilities, maybe some kind of stealth attack or blink to get onto squishy mage targets and take them out, similar to how he does in the trailer. He's part of the Antivan Crow faction. Ballera has a bow, yes, but is a mage, which is a huge difference for the Dragon Age series and, well, most RPGs. She will have magical arrow attacks, a heal of some kind, and the ability Fade Bolts. It deals electric damage, has a high cooldown, applies shock on hit which further increases damage a target takes, but most importantly, it detonates sundered targets. So if you have a warrior or rogue that sunders armor, well, you'll want to equip Fade Bolts on Ballera and combo away. Ballera also specializes in electricity where Neve is ice. No, we don't get a fire mage companion. Electric magic is said to be good against the Sentinels, which are demon-infested suits of mechanical armor. She also has an ability called Tinker, which lets her interact with ancient elven technology, or more accurately, according to John Epler, fix stuff. Each companion will have their own environmental ability. Think HMs in Pokemon. So an example would be a party member might be able to cut a path through a special area for you, and others might be able to move a boulder. We don't know exactly what they all have right now, but eventually Rook will get the ability to use their companion abilities without needing them to be in the party, so there may be some Metroidvania style backtracking later on. Ballera is part of the Veil Jumper faction. Emmrich is a mage and more specifically a necromancer. He he has a skeletal assistant with him called Manfred, so it'll be a way to have 3 companions with you rather than 2. Necromancers no doubt have ways to buff allies and debuff enemies, so Emmrich might be the closest thing to a support. We haven't seen much of him and what he can do, but he's a member of the Mourn Watch faction, and it's suggested you can get a skeleton involved in his romance, so I mean, if there are any necrophiliacs out there, go for it. Davrin is a warrior, and more specifically, a sword and board warrior, so if you want someone to tank and absorb damage, he's your man. Notably, he has a baby griffin with him, and yes, you can pat and hug the griffin. As a Grey Warden, he will no doubt be good against Darkspawn. Taash is your other warrior, though she seems more focused on damage. In the trailer, she's dual-wielding axes, though the devs have confirmed that warriors cannot dual-wield. So either this is creative licensing, or she sits outside the mold of the class, which most of these companions seem to do. If it is a creative license, she will be a two-handed specialization of the warrior. Though I feel as though she just sits outside the mold since she's shown killing Darkspawn with the very same twin axes. She's a dragon hunter, so expect her to be good against beasts. She's allied with the Lords of Fortune faction. Finally, we have fan favorite Harding. She's a rogue with heavy focus on ranged bow combat. So we have both her and Ballera that use a bow as a basic attack, but Harding has a more physical focus. Surprisingly, they both work well together. One of Harding's abilities is Shred, which deals physical damage on a moderate cooldown. It deals high stagger, which is like a stun but simply stops enemies acting for a short time rather than stopping them outright. On bosses, it will contribute to a meter which, when filled, will stun the boss. This is like what we've seen in other games, most recently Diablo 4. So the best thing about this skill is that it applies sundered to the target. So yes, Harding and Ballera have abilities that work together since Ballera can detonate the sundered effect. I'm sure other companions will have the same kinds of interactions with each other, so don't think you automatically must use them both together. In her description, it mentions she has unexpected magical powers, but we've seen that rogues have some magic, so it could be simply rune-based magic, as dwarfs typically can't be mages. Notably, she also has no faction affiliation mentioned, so you'll get no specific bonus dialogue with her based on your background choice, though it could be simply that she reacts based on each background. Technically, her background is the Inquisition, but that faction will not have a presence in the game. So those are all the companions we'll have access to in Veilguard: 2 warriors, 2 rogues, and 2 mages. So how do you choose who you want on your team? Keep in mind, to get skill points with these characters, you need to bond with them, meaning you really want to make a choice, at least at the start. Well, you could choose based on who you want to romance, though based on feedback I'm getting in every video and what I see on Reddit, there's a very niche handful of you that have a good idea of who that is, and the rest either don't like any of the choices, and yes, that includes my queer friends as well, not just straight males, or the others simply don't know who they would like to romance just yet. So if you won't choose based on romance, it may be a better idea to choose based on team composition. Without knowing all the companion abilities, we can still make educated assumptions. A balanced team is typically a warrior, a rogue, and a mage, though we can break the mold a little based on the fact that your character, Rook, can cause enough chaos to offset any lacking role no matter your class choice, because this is an action game. So if you pick warrior, specifically a sword and board champion, you'll want some damage. You can pick Harding or Lucanis to fill that rogue role, and Neve or Ballera for the mage role. Since you're already a tank, I feel Emmrich in a necromancer buff-debuff role won't be as appreciated as straight damage, since Ballera and Harding can also heal. Like mentioned, I would suggest the Grey Warden faction for your choice in this case. If you pick a more damage-focused warrior like the Reaper or the Slayer, Emmrich might actually come in handy, giving you some extra tank and a skeleton for a distraction. The other choices I made for the Sword and Board Warrior still stand, as you'll appreciate some ranged damage. As a Reaper, I would suggest the Mourn Watch or Antivan Crows background, and as the Slayer, I would suggest the Lords of Fortune. If you pick Rogue, specifically a melee-based rogue like the Duelist or Saboteur, you may want someone to distract enemies, namely Davrin or Taash. You'd want some control to ensure you get those backstabs in, so Neve might be a good option for Mage, keeping in mind she can freeze enemies. If you choose the Duelist, I would suggest the Lords of Fortune background. If you chose the Saboteur, I would choose the Antivan Crows or the Shadow Dragons. If you picked a range rogue, the Veil Ranger, you'd want Davrin even more. For your second companion, you could choose any of the mages, though I feel this is where Emmrich may shine, since he gives you another companion to distract, and any buffs or debuffs would help a ranged rogue deal damage. Ballera could also be a good choice since electric attacks usually shock, further increasing your damage output. If so, the Veil Jumpers would be the perfect background choice. If you pick an elemental focused mage, the Invoker, you'll want someone to get in and distract, so Davrin once again or Taash. Though if you have a lot of control effects, Lucanis could also be very effective in this role. If you do go with Lucanis, then having an extra body there with Emmrich could be good, though since you're putting out the damage and control, Harding and Davrin would be my picks. Or you could lean into damage and do something like Ballera and Neve. 3 mages in the field hoping you don't get destroyed, why not? It sounds fun to me. As the Invoker, I would choose the Shadow Dragon's background. As a Deathcaller, you'll have a lot more flexibility. It seems almost any companion mix would work as long as you have someone that hits in melee, since we know Necromancers are typically tanky and have ways to survive and buff. As the Deathcaller, I would choose the Mourn Watch background, my second choice being the Antivan Crows. As a melee-based mage, the Spellblade, you'll most likely want someone else in melee with you and another character to sit back and heal or buff. So either Davrin, Lucanis or Taash with you, and either Emmrich, Harding, Neve or Ballera sitting back. I'd base this completely on your combos. As the Spellblade, I would choose the Veil Jumper's background. So as hinted, your background choice may also influence who you bring with you. Remember, your background can match one of the 7 companions, giving you more dialogue with them. It's unclear if this gives them something tangible in the game outside of dialogue, but it may be something you want to do for role-playing purposes. For example, if you're choosing the Shadow Dragons, you may want Neve in your party. So that's everything. What do you think? Do you disagree with me? Let me know below. Do you have any idea of what class, background and companions you'll choose come release? I'd love to know. Thanks so much to MSI for this Mass Effect themed PC, and I'm sorry but I'm going to be talking about this for a long while. Thanks so much for watching, and for everything RPG, you're in the right place. Ciao friends.